Yes, it is. Ends with a bark.
Just as it starts.
Well, it wasn't me this time. Okay. Welcome, everybody. First full week of September under our belt.
Yes.
September 10th, 2021. Just for the record books, I like to say things like that.
Yeah.
We were just talking offline there. I had my first full week in the office downtown, driving from the center of the universe, also known as Canada, Ontario, where everything happens. And yeah, it's quite the adventure. I will note there is actually some news here to note is that I would say so we've been kind of going on Mondays and basically no traffic, nobody. We're at 50 O'Connor, which is right across from World Exchange Plaza. We pretty much park there every time, and there's barely anybody that parks there through the week. I would say that the parking garage is 3/4 full. And the traffic probably took me 45 minutes to get downtown today. So
picking up.
The world thinks it's coming back.
Yeah, I think so.
It believes, and I'm a believer too.
I like it. It.
Yeah.
Kids back in school, all that.
Kids back in school, kinda, and yeah. Just rolling.
That's it.
All right. Well, let's jump right into it, Ben. Let's I know you got lots planned for us today, so
sure.
Why don't you start off with what the week held for you?
Yeah, so the markets were a little bit choppy this week. I think, as I noted in my daily yesterday, there's a bit more news than usual. We had kind of a couple of Fed governors in the U.S. Kind of saying that maybe they shouldn't be able to buy and sell stocks anymore from outside pressure. So for ethical concerns. So these are guys that make decisions on what's happening with interest rates, and they're still buying and selling stocks for themselves. It's crazy that in the day and age it is now that they're allowed to do that. Now, typically in Canada, what happens if you become a politician, everything goes into a blind trust and somebody has to manage it on your behalf. So there's an arm's length from it. But in the US, I guess that's not the case. So the Fed governors, a couple of them said they were going to liquidate their stocks today because maybe that they're making bad decisions or being influenced by the decisions. It's hard to believe, but that happened yesterday. Then we had it's crazy. And then we had a political debate last night. I don't know, did you watch any of that? Trudeau and
I did.
Catch some of it.
I did catch it. Yeah, absolutely.
It was. I didn't take anything away from it except for as a bunch of people yelling at each other, each trying to talk over each other. Wasn't a lot of content for me when I watched it. Discussions and debates about the housing market. Most of the things I watched, it looks like everyone's just trying to play to their base. There wasn't anything really in their material that I saw. Was there anything in there that you saw that jumped out at you?
Not really. Like you said, probably the housing market was, the most interesting as it typically is. And yeah, I don't know. It's just kind of be now the culture of those debates. It doesn't seem to matter if it's Canadian or American. It
sure
just becomes a pissing match, as they say.
That's right. And housing, when they talked about housing, they all kind of said, well, we have the solution. And I'm not sure that any of them had the solution, except for what the solution is always is prices need to go lower if you want affordability to happen. So none of them are actually willing to do that, which would mean higher interest rates and more taxes on home ownership. But home ownership and kind of construction in Canada makes up such a giant part of our GDP. The likelihood that anybody in any of those parties decide to attack housing, I'd say is pretty much nil. So that was an interesting discussion there. So those things caught my attention, I guess, this week from out of the ordinary. From a market perspective, there wasn't anything material. Markets kind of went sideways. Volumes, which I'll show in one of my slides here, didn't change as much as I thought it would this week, and so we'll see what carries over to next week.
Gotcha. So if anybody has any questions, of course, as always, I mean, I see the group it's on. It's our usual suspects, maybe a couple others.
Yeah.
So everybody know how it works. If you have a question, just raise your hand, click the chat or the Q&A there, and we'll answer it directly.
Mm-hmm.
As far as portfolios are concerned, what got done in there? Not to put you on the spot, man.
Yeah, so we've started to kind of some of those names that I bought earlier this year starting to perk up a little bit. We had Blade Mobility, which is one of the names that Kathy Wood likes, but also Hedgeye likes. They signed a deal to add a healthcare company to their business. So their stock was up 25% yesterday, and carried through decent today. But as for new additions, I added to Penn, which isn't a new one, but added to it today. It sold off pretty good. Added to real estate XLRE, added to S&P 500 yesterday, so SPYs. It's one of those things where you're looking at it and you say, what do I want to buy? And you kind of look across the spectrum at individual stocks. And when you don't have an answer for that, you just buy the index. And so yesterday, which is rare, I bought SPYs. And a new name I think this week would be Juniper Networks as well, came into the buy zone. So that was a new kind of tech name that hasn't been in the portfolio in a couple of years. So those are generally the additions this week.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Back by popular demand, I hear you have some charts for us.
Yeah, I do. I got a few. Thought I'd go through a couple of more. They are ones that I tend to pull and look at every day, and sometimes they go into the dailies as well. But I thought I'd just pop it into the viewing. So let me know when you can see it. I will share it now.
Good. Do you want me to sing the jingle while it comes up?
That'd be great.
Ben's charts. Ben's charts. Okay, what do we got here? Everybody can see it. It's up.
Excellent. So this is the one, obviously, that I comment on volumes, and so I'd expected the volumes to pick up this week. It seems like people are coming back to work, not only in the city, as Scott mentioned, people are going back to work in Ottawa, but across the world. You'd expect the world to kind of start buying again. And if you look at the numbers there, prior day over day, pretty much no change. Month over month, not much change. And then kind of the 3-month rolling average is still negative. And then a year over year, again, which is the comparables, right, from 12 months ago. And September wasn't crazy volatile last year. So you still got volumes way down right now. And so the market really hasn't taken a direction yet. Seem to be thinking that I'll show you a couple more pages, but from looking at this, volumes really are saying that the market hasn't taken a big direction yet as to where they think things are moving. So, and then on the last slide, I'll make a reference to volumes and volatility and some of the other things I look at. But this other one, which is correlations to the US dollar. And so sometimes I talk about this. I know definitely on a one-on-one conversations, I'll go through this with clients. But again, these are all things that come into the thinking. If you look at the kind of the first line, which is the S&P 500 relative to the US dollar, and you got a big negative correlation right now. US dollar goes up, S&P goes down. But if you look over the kind of the longer term, if you look at the 52 week, you're looking at a 0.7 of a high. So inverse correlation to 0.94, and we're kind of at the further end of that 0.7 right now. So when I'd look at this as a signal, as a standalone signal, I'd say you have kind of that inverse correlation reaching the one end of the extreme, which likely means S&P 500 goes higher when this normalizes. Another inverse correlation there, you look at US dollar and oil, again, big tilted towards negative 0.72 right now in the 15-day number. CRB, not much change. Gold, you're looking at a minus 0.6 inverse correlation. That's not at extreme levels. You see kind of a neutral sign on there. And then Bitcoin would be that bottom one. So inverse correlation on Bitcoin of minus 0.42. So not too much to worry about from that perspective. But when I look at these two charts, you see the two red ones, S&P and oil. You tend to think if those normalize, where the correlations get unhooked, you get oil and S&P 500 moving higher. And then the last one, so you look at volumes, and then this is kind of the non-commercial positioning. Obviously, a lot of information on here, but these are just data points to look at. And when, the green arrows would be something to pay attention to from a buying perspective, and the red arrows are something that you'd kind of want to avoid. And so if we look at just from a simplistic perspective, I've talked a bit about oil a few times there, and you look at oil would be signaling that there's lots of potential still for upside, because you have the positioning still underweight, kind of the max long. And then silver as well, which I've talked a couple of times about as well. Again, the positioning looks like there's still significant upside for silver. For some reason, it hasn't broken out. But this is part of my daily look at the positioning from asset class perspective. Any questions on those ones?
No questions yet for anybody.
I'm going to stop sharing.
Awesome.
Yeah, so lots again. I mean, I think the point more than anything is it's just these are some of the cross asset data points I look at each day. I think it's important to just try to educate and bring the numbers in, what I'm looking at, why I'm looking at those things, but not go in over detail. But these are the daily look, what's happening, what's going on, and these are some of the things that come into my decision making.
For sure. Yeah, that's cool. It's always interesting to see, what helps you make your decision, right? People often ask, like, well, how do you know what to buy, what to sell, right? And that kind of shows people how you make your decisions. That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Just waiting if there's any questions. No questions yet, so that's fine. Do you have anything to add to the charts, or you want to move on?
Yeah, I'd say not too much more to add on the charts. The last couple of weeks, I guess I've talked about some potential changing to my view on what's ahead. And we've talked about the quads multiple times. And I think what's happened over the last couple of weeks is we've seen kind of a convergence in the middle. And that's the worst place. You got the 4 different quadrants, right? Where, if you get extremes in any of those quadrants, it's significantly easier from a perspective. If you get deep quad 4, simple, what you want to own, long treasuries, US dollars. If you get a deep quad 2, which we had earlier this year, small caps are going to work in that period. But we've got kind of this convergence into the middle, where you got each of the different kind of quadrants weighing in somewhere between 20 and 30% in each of them. And so you've had just a chop show in the markets, where you get lots of chop happening. And that's not a fun place to be. So spending a lot of time trying to understand, even though the data says we're going into quad 4, it's going to be narrow. So what's that going to mean with the setup? And what I'm leaning towards looking at now is, some of these small caps that I've mentioned, like Blade, some of these SPACs that we've owned, they're starting to show that, money's starting to come back to that. Small caps got kicked really hard in the past 3-4 months. So likely going to stay with those positions, which I wouldn't have in a traditional quad 4 setup. So that kind of convergence in the middle has really changed the thinking a little bit. I still think there's a reasonable likelihood of a correction in the back half of this year. If we don't get that kind of that 10 to 20% correction in the back half of the year, then I think that Q2 of next year sell-off could be worse like we could see a real spanking, like a 40%er. So these are kind of my real-time thoughts around what's happening right now.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's that quad four never really came about, did it?
Well, it hasn't materialized with the
Yeah.
depth that it looked like it was going to originally.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. What do we have coming up for this week? What are you looking at? Just more of the same, or what are you hoping for?
Yeah, so I've had some interesting stuff this week. Watched a couple of telecom analysts. Watched a little bit crypto. Obviously, seems to have grabbed some attention this week. El Salvador officially listed Bitcoin as a currency. They gave actually each individual citizen Bitcoin to open a wallet. And so I don't know if you saw the news, but in the daily I mentioned there, they said that's likely to cost the Western Union $400 million, because Western Union obviously used to take money on both sides of every transaction in El Salvador and many other parts of the world. So, that's interesting, right? That's a big number that has come out. And as we think about what this means, and I know we've talked about this right now already, but 400 million out of the corporation's pocket means 400 million back into other people's hands. Part of the attraction for crypto. So that I think has grabbed quite a bit of attention. We had a reasonable week in the cryptocurrency landscape. And Facebook continues to talk about how they're rolling out DM, which is their currency. So that has grabbed some of my attention this week, and I continue to watch that. As for next week, this was a kind of a reasonable option expiration today. So I'd expect markets to recover pretty nicely next week. We had a reasonable sell-off today, and I'd expect some decent upside in the S&P and the Nasdaq.
Gotcha. Okay, quiet group today.
Yeah.
Nobody raising their hand.
Yeah.
That's okay. That's okay. You've just been so detailed today, Ben.
Maybe.
No questions needed.
Maybe.
Okay. What else? Do you have anything else on your list? I don't have
So not too much
much.
else. It seems like some issues are coming to market again. So it seems like the investment world is coming back a little bit. We've seen a few deals come out this week. We saw Pure Gold Mining, Airboss, Aya Gold, Freehold did a acquisition. Enbridge announced an acquisition where they were buying a port in Texas. They raised some money in bonds today. They did a 10-year and a 30-year issuance. So that market seems to be picking up again. And so I'd expect more of that kind of action coming, especially as markets stay in a reasonable setup. So it seems like business is coming back. Volumes haven't followed through yet, but certainly on the debt and equity raise that's coming back into the markets now, and so that's a positive. That seems like it's a healthy setup right now.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah, the only thing that I noticed that was somewhat significant was the Apple ruling today, where they said that they can no longer force developers to use in-app purchasing. Right, that's a big thing, and that's going to affect Apple because 70% of App Store revenue comes from customers playing games. So that's a major announcement and should certainly affect Apple's revenues, but we'll see about that.
I mean, I think you're right. I think it's certain to hurt Apple's revenues. I mean, one of the things I think is going to be interesting to see how this plays out, because Apple is such a big part of the major indices in the US. Is it going to matter? As fund flows into passive ETFs, is it going to matter to their stock price? I think there's a certainty that it'll affect revenues, as you say. And it'll be interesting to see what the end result of that is to the stock market. But interesting point for sure.
Gotcha. Well, as your dog gets revved up there in the background,
Can
it's
you hear him? Is
probably
he doing a little squeak?
yeah,
Couple of
yeah,
squeaks happening?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I know you're right into the hockey tryouts. I'm kind of mid hockey tryouts, one done, one coming. So
Yeah. Yeah.
busy weekend. No more
For sure.
cottaging and Tremblant and whatever else it is. Real
That's
world.
it. That's it.
Yeah,
Yes,
exactly.
for sure.
Okay. Well, anything else? Did you want to call it for the day?
I'd say the last thing which I've mentioned too is Coinbase seems to be getting into it with the SEC. So that'll be interesting to see. We thought Gensler, when he came in as SEC chair, would approve a Bitcoin ETF, but now it looks like he's going after Coinbase and wants to sue them. So it'd be interesting to see how that plays out from a crypto space. But I think there was more news in the media this week than I've seen the past 2 months. But
Mhm.
from does it change the setup right now? I don't think there's anything that does that, but more news than we've seen in a long time.
For sure.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah, that's it.
Okay. Well, that's a wrap on September 10th. And everybody have a great weekend, and we will see you next week.
Sounds good. Take care.
Okay. See how we going.
Bye.